One of the most overlooked disciplines in Stoicism is the control of one's tongue. Words are powerful. They can build or destroy, heal or wound, inspire or demoralize. The Stoics constantly reminded themselves that speaking is easy but silence is golden. When you control your mouth, you not only avoid unnecessary conflicts but also preserve your dignity and authority. Too many people lose respect, relationships, and even opportunities simply because they could not control what they said in a moment of anger or carelessness. Controlling your mouth means resisting the temptation to gossip, insult, exaggerate, or complain. Instead, it means practicing restraint, pausing before responding, and using words intentionally. Seneca said, "It is a great thing to know the season for speech and the season for silence." The ability to remain silent when provoked is not weakness, it is an expression of strength. In a world where everyone wants to be heard, the wise person chooses when and how to speak. This form of self-control creates peace of mind, stronger relationships, and a reputation for wisdom. Mastering your mouth is the first step toward mastering your life, because the words you release shape the reality you live in. If the mouth reveals what is inside the heart, then the mind is the source of everything we say and do. Stoicism teaches that we must rule our minds or be ruled by them. The human mind, left uncontrolled, becomes restless, impulsive, and destructive. Negative thoughts spiral into negative emotions, which in turn lead to poor decisions. This is why Epictetus emphasized that we cannot control external events, but we can control how we think about them. Training the mind begins with awareness, watching your thoughts like a guardian at the gates. Instead of letting every fear, anger, or desire run wild, the Stoic filters thoughts through reason. Is this thought useful? Does it lead me closer to virtue? Is it under my control? These questions act like discipline for the mind. When you develop the habit of rational thought, you stop being a slave to impulses. The Stoic mind becomes calm in chaos, strong in adversity, and focused in distraction. By controlling your mind, you create freedom, not freedom from problems, but freedom from unnecessary suffering. It is here that true strength is born, because the quality of your thoughts will always determine the quality of your life. Money has been both a tool of progress and a source of misery for humanity. The Stoics never condemned wealth, but they warned against becoming enslaved to it. Seneca, one of the wealthiest Stoics, wrote that riches are not evil in themselves, rather, our attachment to them corrupts us. Controlling your money means mastering the art of financial discipline. It is not about greed or luxury but about responsibility and balance. Many people chase money endlessly, believing it will bring happiness, only to discover emptiness. The Stoic approach is to treat money as a servant, never as a master. Save diligently, spend wisely, avoid unnecessary debt, and invest in what truly matters: your growth, your family, your peace of mind. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that external possessions are fleeting, and true wealth lies in character. When you control your money, you are no longer controlled by financial stress, envy, or reckless desire. You begin to use money as a tool for freedom, not slavery. A Stoic does not measure success by riches but by virtue. Yet, with wisdom and discipline, financial stability becomes another pillar that allows you to live with dignity and independence. At first, controlling your mouth, mind, and money may seem like separate disciplines, but Stoicism shows us that they are deeply interconnected. The words you speak reflect the state of your mind, and the way you think often influences how you manage money. For example, a careless mind produces careless speech and careless spending. On the other hand, a disciplined mind produces thoughtful speech and disciplined financial choices. This is why Stoics believe that self-mastery is not limited to one area of life but must cover every dimension. If you lose control over one, it weakens the others. A wise person avoids reckless words that create enemies, reckless thoughts that create anxiety, and reckless spending that creates debt. Instead, the Stoic practices harmony, calm mind, careful words, and conscious use of resources. These three together form the foundation for a life of stability and power. In mastering them, you not only avoid unnecessary suffering but also create space for true growth. The man who governs his mouth, mind, and money becomes almost unshakable, because he has reduced the number of ways the world can control him. The ultimate goal of Stoicism is not to suppress life but to conquer it, not by dominating others, but by mastering oneself. When you control your mouth, you rise above petty arguments and destructive speech. When you control your mind, you rise above fear, anger, and distraction. When you control your money, you rise above dependency, greed, and financial chaos. Together, these disciplines create freedom, stability, and power, the ingredients needed to conquer life. Conquering life does not mean you will never face challenges. Stoics faced poverty, exile, betrayal, and even death. But what made them unbreakable was their commitment to inner control. Life is not conquered by avoiding problems, but by meeting them with strength and wisdom. By practicing control, you become the ruler of your inner kingdom, no longer enslaved by impulses, emotions, or material desires. This is the essence of Stoicism: victory through discipline, power through self-mastery, peace through virtue. The man who controls himself conquers life itself, because no external force can truly defeat him. Silence is often misunderstood as weakness, but in Stoicism, silence is one of the most powerful weapons of strength. When you remain silent in situations where anger or foolishness would normally provoke you, you demonstrate mastery over yourself. A man who blurts out every thought is like a city without walls, exposed and vulnerable. But a man who can remain silent, even when insulted or tested, is fortified like a strong fortress. Controlling your mouth is not just about avoiding conflict but also about preserving energy. Every unnecessary argument drains mental strength, distracts from higher goals, and fuels the ego. Marcus Aurelius wrote that we should waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be, but rather be one. Silence often speaks louder than words. It shows discipline, confidence, and wisdom. In a noisy world, people remember the one who speaks less but says more. Practicing silence means resisting the urge to defend your pride in every situation, avoiding gossip, and speaking only when it adds value. In this way, silence becomes not just restraint but power, the kind of power that commands respect without ever demanding it. The mind is a battlefield, and if you do not train it, you will be defeated by your own thoughts. A Stoic trains the mind like a warrior trains for battle, through discipline, repetition, and resilience. Every day, thoughts will attack you, fears of the future, regrets of the past, desires you cannot control. If you let them, they will consume you. But if you train your mind, you learn to observe them without obeying them. Epictetus compared life to a play where we cannot choose our role, but we can choose how we perform it. Similarly, we cannot choose every thought that enters our mind, but we can choose how we respond. Training the mind involves practices like journaling, meditation, self-questioning, and rational reflection. It is about catching the thought before it becomes an action and testing it against reason. Over time, this discipline creates mental clarity and resilience. A trained mind does not panic when adversity comes. It does not collapse when desires go unfulfilled. Instead, it stands firm, ready for the battles of life. The warrior mind is calm in chaos, unshaken by storms, and unbroken by hardship. People often misunderstand money, thinking it brings freedom simply by having more of it. In reality, freedom comes not from money itself but from discipline in managing it. Many people with great wealth are still enslaved by greed, debt, and anxiety, while others with modest means live in peace because they practice financial wisdom. Stoicism teaches us to live within our means, avoid waste, and never let desire for wealth overshadow virtue. Controlling your money means setting priorities, resisting unnecessary luxuries, and saving for the future. It also means recognizing that true value lies not in possessions but in character. Seneca reminded us that wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. The discipline of money is not about being cheap but about being conscious. Do your expenses align with your goals? Does your spending serve your growth or your ego? When you control your money, you eliminate one of the greatest sources of stress in modern life: financial instability. With that burden lifted, you can focus on higher pursuits, wisdom, relationships, and personal excellence. This is the true freedom that financial discipline offers. Impulsiveness is the enemy of self-mastery. Whether it is speaking without thinking, reacting without reflection, or spending without planning, impulses often lead to regret. The Stoics understood that human beings are naturally drawn toward indulgence, but unchecked indulgence is a form of slavery. A man who cannot resist anger is a slave to his emotions. A man who cannot resist spending is a slave to his desires. In every aspect of life, control is the foundation of freedom. Marcus Aurelius warned himself to stand firm against the temptations of luxury and distraction, for they weaken the soul. When you learn to pause before acting, you create space for wisdom to enter. Impulse is fast, but wisdom is patient. By resisting the urge to speak, think, or act recklessly, you prevent chaos and strengthen discipline. This does not mean suppressing all joy or pleasure, but rather practicing moderation, enjoying without being enslaved. The Stoics called this living according to nature, which meant living in balance, not excess. Impulsiveness destroys, but restraint builds. When you rise above impulse, you begin to live with purpose, clarity, and true strength. Conquering life is not about controlling others but about controlling yourself. Many chase power, wealth, and fame, thinking these will bring conquest. But history shows that even kings and emperors have been slaves to their desires. The Stoic path is different. It teaches that the true conqueror is the one who masters his mouth, his mind, and his money. These three areas are practical, measurable, and universal. If you control your mouth, you avoid conflict and gain respect. If you control your mind, you remain calm in adversity and wise in decision-making. If you control your money, you live free from the chains of financial stress. Together, they create a life of stability, clarity, and inner strength. Conquering life through Stoicism does not mean eliminating challenges but facing them with courage and discipline. The man who rules himself is unshakable because external events cannot control his inner world. This is the Stoic secret. Victory comes not from dominating the world but from conquering the self. When you achieve this, you do not just survive life, you master it. One of the greatest forms of controlling the mouth is not only knowing when to remain silent, but also learning to listen more deeply. In the modern world, people compete to be heard, but few compete to understand. Stoicism teaches that wisdom is often gained not from speaking but from listening. Epictetus famously said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." Listening requires humility, patience, and discipline. It means setting aside the ego's desire to dominate conversations and instead focusing on truly absorbing knowledge, perspectives, and truths. When you train yourself to listen more than you speak, you build stronger relationships, avoid unnecessary conflicts, and open yourself to wisdom that you would have missed if you were too busy talking. Controlling your mouth in this way makes your words, when you finally do speak, carry more weight and respect. It is not the man who talks endlessly who commands authority, but the one who speaks sparingly yet wisely. By making listening a daily discipline, you not only protect yourself from careless words but also enrich your mind with the thoughts and experiences of others. Just as the body becomes weak if it consumes poison, the mind becomes weak if it consumes negativity. Stoicism teaches us that we must carefully guard what enters our mind, for thoughts shape emotions, and emotions shape actions. If you constantly feed your mind with anger, gossip, fear, or envy, your actions will reflect those poisons. This is why Marcus Aurelius advised himself to avoid being stained by the blackness of another's soul. Guarding your mind means being selective about what you read, watch, and listen to. It also means choosing carefully the company you keep, because negative people plant negative seeds in your thoughts. A Stoic does not allow every idea to enter unchallenged. Instead, he filters it through reason. Is this thought useful? Does this influence bring me closer to virtue? Will it strengthen or weaken my character? By guarding the mind, you prevent yourself from being dragged into the chaos of the world. You cannot always control what happens around you, but you can control what you allow to live inside you. A well-guarded mind is a fortress against anxiety, anger, and despair. Wealth, when gained without wisdom, often destroys more lives than it builds. The Stoics were not against wealth itself. They understood its usefulness. but they warned against letting it corrupt the soul. Seneca, though wealthy, often reflected on poverty to remind himself that true happiness did not depend on riches. To control your money is to build wealth with virtue, not greed. This means earning honestly, avoiding exploitation, and never sacrificing integrity for profit. Too often, people pursue wealth at the cost of their health, family, or character, only to realize too late that they traded what was priceless for what was temporary. A Stoic uses money to create stability, not vanity, to support growth, not indulgence. Financial discipline means saving diligently, avoiding unnecessary debts, and ensuring that your wealth is a tool of freedom, not a chain of slavery. It also means being generous, using your resources to uplift others rather than hoarding them out of fear. True wealth, the Stoics remind us, lies in having few desires, not in having endless possessions. By controlling your money with virtue, you create not only material security but also spiritual peace. Patience is one of the most underrated Stoic virtues, yet it is essential for mastering the mouth, the mind, and money. Without patience, you will speak too soon, think too rashly, and spend too quickly. Patience is the art of waiting without anxiety and acting without haste. Marcus Aurelius wrote about enduring difficulties without complaint, recognizing that time is often the greatest healer and teacher. In speech, patience prevents you from saying words you will later regret. In the mind, patience allows you to observe your emotions before reacting, ensuring that you act with reason rather than impulse. In money, patience prevents reckless spending and encourages long-term thinking, allowing wealth to grow steadily instead of disappearing through instant gratification. Patience is not weakness, it is a form of strength that comes from self-control. The Stoic who practices patience becomes resilient because he does not demand that life happen on his schedule. He trusts that challenges will pass, emotions will settle, and opportunities will arrive in their own time. In mastering patience, you master yourself, and in mastering yourself, you conquer life. Stoicism constantly reminds us that freedom comes not from excess but from simplicity. Many people trap themselves in lives of endless complication because they cannot control their desires. They want more words to prove themselves, more thoughts to feed their anxieties, more money to fuel their vanity. But the Stoic learns that by simplifying, he gains freedom. Controlling your mouth means you only speak what is necessary and true. Controlling your mind means you strip away unnecessary fears and focus only on what is in your control. Controlling your money means you reduce wasteful spending and live within your means. Together, these practices create a life of clarity and freedom. Simplicity does not mean poverty or silence but balance. It means having enough and knowing that enough is sufficient. Seneca wrote that poverty is not having too little, but wanting more than enough. When you embrace simplicity, you no longer feel enslaved by comparison, envy, or greed. You live lightly, free from the burdens of excess, and in that freedom lies peace. The simple life, guided by Stoic discipline, is the strongest foundation for conquering life. One of the biggest reasons people fail to control their mouths is because of the ego. The ego constantly wants to prove itself right, to defend its pride, to impress others with knowledge, or to win every argument. But the Stoics knew that giving in to the ego's desire to speak recklessly is a trap that leads to regret. The wise man is not the one who wins every debate but the one who avoids unnecessary ones. Controlling the mouth means disciplining the ego, reminding it that silence does not mean weakness, and restraint does not mean defeat. Marcus Aurelius often wrote to himself not to waste energy arguing with fools or chasing validation from the crowd. Instead, he reminded himself that inner peace mattered more than outward recognition. When you stop speaking to prove yourself, you begin speaking only to serve truth, wisdom, and necessity. In this way, every word becomes intentional, every sentence carries meaning, and every silence becomes powerful. The Stoic conquers his life by conquering his ego, and that begins with mastering the tongue. The Stoics believe that the mind is the true battlefield of life. You can be wealthy, healthy, and admired, yet still live in misery if your mind is uncontrolled. Conversely, you can face poverty, sickness, or exile, and yet remain free if your mind is disciplined. Epictetus himself was born a slave, but he insisted that no man could enslave his mind unless he allowed it. This is why Stoicism focuses so much on controlling thoughts, because they are the root of everything. A mind full of envy, anger, or fear creates a life full of chaos. A mind trained in gratitude, reason, and courage creates a life full of peace. The choice is yours. Will your mind enslave you, or will it free you? Training the mind requires constant practice, reminding yourself daily of what is within your control and what is not, replacing harmful thoughts with rational ones, and refusing to dwell on fantasies or fears that weaken you. The man who controls his mind is unbreakable, because no external force can dictate how he thinks. That is true freedom. Money is not just about survival, it is also about legacy. How you control your money will determine not only your own peace of mind but also the opportunities you create for others. A Stoic does not waste wealth on vanity while his family suffers, nor does he hoard greedily while others starve. He uses money wisely, balancing generosity with responsibility. Controlling your money means understanding that every coin spent or saved has consequences beyond the present moment. It shapes your future and, in many cases, the future of those you love. A disciplined approach to money allows you to build stability, provide for others, and even leave behind a legacy of wisdom. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that what truly endures is not gold or property but the character we leave in others. Still, financial discipline makes it possible to live with dignity and independence, free from the humiliation of constant debt or dependency. By controlling your money with virtue, you show that wealth is not your master but your servant, and in doing so, you leave behind a legacy not just of riches, but of wisdom and responsibility. Many people believe that power comes from wealth, status, or influence. But Stoicism teaches that the highest power is self-mastery. A king who cannot control his anger is weaker than a slave who controls his mind. A rich man who wastes money on indulgence is poorer than a beggar who lives with contentment. A speaker who cannot restrain his tongue is less respected than the silent man who speaks only with purpose. Self-mastery, controlling the mouth, the mind, and money, is the foundation of all true power. It allows you to face adversity without fear, to resist temptation without weakness, and to live freely without being controlled by desires or circumstances. Epictetus reminded us that no man is truly free unless he is the master of himself. Self-mastery is not about perfection but progress. Each day, by practicing control, you grow stronger. And each victory over impulse, fear, or greed adds to your strength. When you master yourself, you no longer seek power over others, because you already possess the greatest power, command over your own life. The ultimate lesson of Stoicism is that life is not conquered by chance, luck, or fortune, but by discipline and self-control. Controlling your mouth prevents you from destroying relationships and builds respect. Controlling your mind prevents you from being enslaved by emotions and builds resilience. Controlling your money prevents you from falling into chaos and builds freedom. Together, these practices lead to self-mastery, and self-mastery leads to the conquest of life. To conquer life does not mean eliminating challenges. It means rising above them with wisdom, patience, and strength. The Stoics faced death, exile, and betrayal, yet they lived with dignity because they understood that the true battlefield is within. Conquering life is not about dominating others but about ruling yourself. When you control your mouth, your mind, and your money, you no longer live as a victim of impulses, fears, or desires. You live as a master of yourself, and in doing so, you achieve the highest victory possible, a life of peace, virtue, and unshakable strength. This is the Stoic way. This is how you conquer life.